Hi, Christine. Am I early?
Hi, you are, but welcome. I'm just getting myself sorted out. So hang tight and we'll get everything going once more people show up. There's about 150 people signed up. So, there's always some people who can't make it, but we'll get going in a few minutes. I'm just checking my technology, make sure it's working. It's always a bit of a toss up.
Okay, sure.
Let's see. Let's see. Okay. Feel free to just hang tight, take a water break, whatever. And then once we're at the top of the hour, I'll sort of do a whole hi everybody and get it going, so you'll know that we're getting moving.
Sure.
Hi everyone, welcome. We're just letting people filter in. You're a little early, which is great. I love to see the enthusiasm, but we'll wait till the top of the hour and then kind of let everybody get filtered in once they figure out how their link works, etc., and get everything going. Feel free as you are joining to, pop any sort of name where you're sort of joining in from in the chat. This full disclosure, this is my first time using Leland's platform. I've always used Zoom, so fingers crossed we don't have any technological issues. Once sort of everybody gets here, we'll get started. You do not need to turn yourselves off camera or off mute at any point. In fact, probably while I'm doing sort of the initial introduction stuff, I'll keep you all on mute just to sort of get everything sorted out. And then, depending on how many people join, I can unmute you all and, give more of a chance to ask questions both within the chat and potentially, raising hands and calling on people. It always depends on how many people show up. Just kind of, it's a big toss up, right? So, it's these kinds of events are always great. It's my great opportunity to be able to share who I am with you and to get to know each of you a little bit more. But usually people are sort of joining from work or wherever they are. So it's a little bit tricky. So I saw a few people posting in, welcome from India and welcome from London. One of my favorite places. I lived in London for 8 years. It still is my favorite place to be. I wish I still lived in London, but someday again soon, I think I'll make it back to live, but always make it once a year. But but we're just going to wait like maybe one more minute just as people kind of come in, so that you know, I will probably have to be flipping back and forth because I have this tiny screen. My second screen died the other day. So I am going to do my best to sort of see the questions in the chat and things like that. But we'll definitely, most of the time in conversation is going to be your time. It isn't Ask Me Anything, so your time to sort of ask your questions, and I'm going to do the best I can to answer as many as I possibly can in the 45 minutes that we have. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and attempt, fingers crossed, to share with you my presentation, which, if I'm lucky, will be here. There it is. Fingers crossed you can see it. If anybody can sort of give me a, I guess a thumbs up to make sure you can see it, that would be great. I'm going to have to flip back and forth, unfortunately, to be able to see you once I get started. But for the second, for the moment, oh, good. Okay, you're seeing it. For the moment, I just want to make sure you're seeing it before I dive in. And like I said, we will have plenty of time for questions. So without further ado, I'm going to dive in. Apologies for this view, but I am going to make it so that I can see it and you all can see it better, make it bigger. So okay, so in any case, I'm very happy to be here with you today. My name is Christine Balzano. I have been in the MBA admission space for a really long time. Dare I admit how old I am? My entire career has been in university admissions. I started in college admissions more years ago than I'm probably willing to admit, and have been in the MBA admissions space for over 20 years, both on the school side and on the coaching side. So for many, many years with Chicago Booth, in fact, before it was called Chicago Booth. And then when my family moved to London, continued with Booth, but not on the admissions side, working with our career services team for our executive MBA program. So in the US side, I was full-time admissions. On the UK side, I was career services side for MBA students, and then eventually moved over to London Business School on a contract with them, working with their admissions process, reading applications, all of the parts of being a recruiter for about 6.5-6-ish years. And then, during that time, I took on private admissions consulting. And I can tell you sort of a little bit more about that as we go on. And then have been doing that alongside for the last 5 years, doing some what's the word I'm looking for? Contract work for my time at Yale. So you've probably all seen my sort of profile. Maybe you've clicked on my link and you've had a chance to sort of jump into, knowing a little bit about me. I'm not going to spend a ton of time sort of telling you about me because I want to use this time to allow you to just sort of have your questions answered and dive in. So just wanted to make sure everybody was in. Looks like we have about 25 people, so that's great. Great turnout as far as I'm concerned. If anybody wants to drop a message in the chat while I'm chatting for these first few minutes, I won't be able to see them straight away, but I will jump back and turn off the presentation and then go back to it at the end to put up any contact information. So, okay, so here we are. We're going to have, that was me doing a quick welcome. We're going to kind of hit just a few highlights about sort of what we need to think about as we're considering business school admissions. Don't forget to shine, some common pitfalls, things that are always a good idea, and then leave you room for question and answer of things you've always wanted to ask. So this is me, as I mentioned, over 20 years doing this. I'm the only MBA consultant out there who's worked for 3 elite MBA programs, Chicago Booth, Business School, and Yale. I currently still am on a contract with Yale, reading applications, vacillates from year to year depending on their needs. And whose position might need covering or how much help they need reading, it is my great pleasure to be on their staff. They're lovely people. So I'm in a very fortunate position to be able to do that. That said, I never work with candidates applying to Yale because it is a conflict. So I can certainly tell you all the lovely things about Yale that they would if you were at an event. But I don't work with clients who are applying to Yale because of the unique situation I'm in. So, and as I mentioned, I was at Chicago Booth, London Business School, and I have had my own admissions consulting business for a really long time. Dare I say how long it is? So anyhow, that's a bit about me. Okay, so don't forget to shine. We're going to sort of cover a few hot, quick things, and then I really want to give you a chance to ask questions. So hopefully this will be, more of what you are hoping for, but apologies because I have to keep flipping back to let people in the room. Started at the beginning. So the most important thing you need to think about is to start early. And by that, I mean, regardless of when you think you might go to business school, start earlier than you think you ever might want to be considering business school. If you are an undergraduate student, if you are still sort of at the very beginning stages of your career, if there's any chance you might want to be going to business school down the road, start early. And by that, I mean, start talking to people, start considering what schools are out there, start doing your research, and please, please, please think about your testing well ahead of time. It is the key piece to the equation that often holds people back from being able to submit their application at a certain round. And it's really nice to sort of get that done and out of the way. Business schools now take, in addition to the GMAT, the GRE, and many business schools still take or will take the executive assessment. And I can talk more about that as well. But, start early, start talking to people, start thinking about it, think about taking those tests when you're fresh and getting the help that you need to, sort of do all that you need to do to, even if you think about it later down the road, to be at a place that allows you to, be ready to apply at a moment's notice kind of thing. Not that you're going to be that quick, but that the test is not holding you back. Number 2, prepare. So we'll talk about this in questions as well, because I really want to know what pressing things you want to know. But over my many years of doing this, being prepared for this process is, the most challenging piece of the equation, and something people don't often think about as being something they really have to, plan for. So for example, if you've had a gap in your work experience, if you currently have a gap, if you're not sure what you want to do career-wise, if you've had a break from school, if you are not sure if you like the career that you're in and you're thinking about pivoting, all those things, think about how it might be viewed by someone reading an application and consider what you might want to do to improve upon that. We'll talk more about it as you have questions. That kind of gets into this improve your profile, right? Think about who you are, and consider that some of these schools are the most elite business schools out there that you might be considering, and you really want to put your best foot forward. And so you want to think about who would you want to present yourself to be, to tell your whole story, and what can you do to make yourself even more interesting, right? Have you invested time in your community? Have you invested time, mentoring and coaching people within your organization or student groups, or depending on what stage you're at? The name of the game in MBA admissions, and really any graduate admissions, is to self-reflect. I know it sounds kind of therapist-y, if you will, but the sort of significant and important piece of that is you have to really know yourself to really understand what you want to do, why now is the time to do it, and what the value of the MBA is going to be. Because in order to be competitive at elite business schools, you really need to be presenting yourself as a complete person, as well as, I've really thought about this. It's a significant $200,000 plus education in some cases in the US. And you really need to know yourself. And that kind of goes for anything, right? No matter what stage you're at. And of course, we never know everything we're going to know as we evolve, but know yourself as well as you can at this stage. And don't be shy to sort of champion yourself for the things you're good at, and really know what you might want and how this particular degree might benefit you. The other thing, find the right school for you. I'm sure you've probably heard this many times, but don't just look at rankings and think, I want to go to business school. I want to get the best job. I want to be able to work for X company. Really go beyond that about yourself. Think about, yeah, it would be great to go to that school, but is that school even culturally a match for me? Is it too big or too small? Is it in a location I want? Do they have the kinds of student groups I'd like to be involved in? Would I have a chance to be a leader in those student groups? Do they, what sort of population of students do they have there? Is it very international? Is it not? All of those things. So really, consider who you are and remember that this is your chance to put yourself in front of schools and say, I'm awesome. You really want to admit me. And here's what I've done to kind of present myself as a person who's going to make contributions to both business and society as I go forward in the world. So last couple things. Without ego, highlight your accomplishments. It can be very, very hard in this process to feel like you're as great a candidate as the person sitting next to you. We all have imposter syndrome from time to time. And it's really important to sort of think about, I'm really good at this. I want to highlight those things, but in a humble way, right? Without ego, really think about what you're good at and where you can shine, both in the business school application process and then once you're a student and beyond. But the most important piece of advice I always give is to be yourself. I can talk about pitfalls, of course I will, but be yourself. It is the most important thing out that is part of this process. And it is a completely missed opportunity to feel that you have to be a certain version to fit for a particular school. It's a little bit like dating. If you're modifying yourself so that you can be palatable to that school, is it really the right place? So really think about that. Be who you are. Okay, I'm going to really quickly just put this up here. You can obviously all read it, but these are some of the most common pitfalls, right? Key to this equation is remember that the person reading your application may or may not have ever worked in business. They are often people like me who have had a career in higher education, having maybe a master's in higher education like myself. Maybe they have MBAs. They might have masters in, other areas. But consider that the person reading your application may not know your career path, may not completely understand your plan, and definitely does not speak your industry's geek speak, as we say. So, present yourself in a way that makes it clear about what you do and that it's completely understandable. Of course, there are many, many career paths that we as professionals on the school side know and understand about careers and trajectories and all of those things. But as the world changes and there are new jobs and new opportunities out there, we have to change with those times and understand those things as much as, you have to kind of evolve and think there should be a job that's X, right? So think about that. Another common pitfall, and you'll be surprised, is things like falsifying information, being dishonest, having somebody do part of the application for you. Schools have ways of knowing these things without giving away any secrets. You all probably know that there's technology out there that can determine, where your documents come from, who the author of those documents are, whether or not you've used AI, for example, whether or not you've maybe falsified grades or things like that on your transcript, right? We've seen it all. And really that's not a way you want to start your career. So go forward with integrity and be honest about this process. Be careful about recycling essays from one school to the next. Having read essays across 3 schools I've worked at, plus then all of the many schools my applicants apply to, we can tell when you are recycling, Stanford What Matters Most and Why essay and using it for a, what's the biggest challenge I've had, or, here's what you need to know about me kind of open-ended essay. So be thoughtful about it. Of course, you can duplicate some content, but customize it to schools. Again, not knowing why you're a fit for a school goes back to that. Know the school, understand. We can tell when you haven't really done much research about us, and it's not about spitting back names of classes and sort of, here's the people I know and here's this program that I've heard of. It's much more about your culture, where you see yourself fitting in, what about the school and their strengths really speaks to your, to what you want to fulfill for yourself career-wise and academically. Again, poor grammar, using ChatGPT, leaving unexplained gaps, using the wrong school name, being repetitive. These are things we see 100-fold, unfortunately. We don't expect it to be prose. We don't expect everything to be perfect, but this is not this is a business school application, right? You are hoping to go and work in business and be in front of, professionals that are working at very high levels. don't use off the cuff slang. Don't be copying things from ChatGPT. I mean, people do it, and you know how we know? Because we can tell when we've read the same kind of essay that sounds awfully similar. Certainly use it as a research tool, but customize it to yourself. It's not that hard to really put yourself forward if you become vulnerable in this process. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make is leaving unexplained gaps. You are absolutely shooting yourself in the foot if you are leaving me to my own devices to try to figure out your timeline, why there's a gap, what you might have been doing then. We go in rating applications wanting you to be successful, but if you don't give us all the information, we don't have the time to dive down a rabbit hole and try and figure those things out. So really make it easy for us to understand. And if you're nervous about something and you're worried how it's going to be perceived, talk to people at these schools. Don't leave your reader with these unanswered questions by the end of the application, because they're not going to have tons of time to go and check on this. You have more control in this process than you think. Answer the question. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I'm reading an essay. I'm like, what question do they think they're answering here? Or you go on your agenda like, they really need to know these things about me, even though they didn't ask that question. It's a real kicker to not answer the question. It doesn't mean some people haven't been admitted for not answering the question, but it's few and far between that they have that opportunity. And really don't underestimate the power of a well thought out strategy with your applications. Do I know the schools? Have I thought about my fit with them? Am I clear about how I'm articulating my path, my plan, how I see the MBA fitting in? Give yourself the best possible odds to do well in this process. Prepare ahead. We're coming up against round 1 deadlines in roughly the beginning to middle of September. And, you really need to sort of think about, how can I be successful in this process? So give yourself time and realize that time is different for everybody, right? Last few things. What do you want schools to know about you? How can you share it with them? Take the time to brainstorm, put those things aside, and then think, okay, do the questions that they're asking on the application allow me to share these things about myself? And I think one of the most common pitfalls and misperceptions about this process is that we have some idea on the school side that you have to fit into this model or look like a certain thing on paper. You have more control in this process than you think. We really want to understand who you are. Tell us who you are. Market yourself to us. Really help us understand where you're going to contribute, how you're going to fit into the community. And don't be afraid to ask for help, whether that's through a consultant like myself, peers who have maybe gone to school that you're working with that are now, ahead of you, classmates who might read your essays if you're, still an undergrad. Call the schools. I have a very good friend and colleague that always says, we're not monsters. We do this for a living because we like people. So call us, email us, ask us the questions. We really want to help you in this process. We are not out to be horrible about this. Unfortunately, there will be people that are not admitted because there's just so many spaces, but we want to try to help you be successful if we think there's an opportunity. Last couple things, and then I'll open it to question. It's always a good idea, like I mentioned, to get your testing out of the way early. Clean up your social media accounts, whether that's, Instagram or Facebook or whatever platforms you're using, Snapchat, LinkedIn, especially. Make sure your dates align. Make sure your career path aligns, on your LinkedIn as it is in your resume. We do check those things. Sometimes we're like, I don't really understand the path. I need to, this needs to make sense. We look at those things, clean those things up. This is your, as much like you're going for a job interview. And as my kid's pediatrician says, if you don't want me to see it on a billboard on, outside my office as I'm going to work, then don't put it out there and make it accessible. Tighten it up, clean it up, be yourself, but, be aware that we might see those things and be comfortable with that. Speak to your recommenders early. Go to things like information, campus visits, office hours, not because you're checking a box so they can see that you've shown interest, but because you will learn from them. It is a common misconception that you need to be at X number of events to be viewed as a candidate who is more compelling than another. Many schools will consider, have they been able to come? Have they engaged with us? Yeah, they really seem to like us, but it's unfair to really use that in the evaluation process because there are loads of you that will be coming from far away that are nowhere capable of being able to visit these schools in advance before you're applying. So it's an unfair playing field. Do it because it's valuable to the process to make your application better, not because you think it's going to up your chances. Don't wait for the last minute to fill out the application form. It is the sleeper part of the application where everyone's like, I'll just dive in there and start filling it out. There's always hidden little short answers or things where you're like, oh, I really want to think about that. Give yourself the time to do that. Check for the school name accuracy many, many times. I can't wait to go to Wharton when I'm reading a Stanford application. Not a good thing. Use your spell check. And like I said, be yourself, be honest. We want nothing more than individual people who are coming to bounce ideas off of each other and are sharing their passions and interests with one another as a way to bring each other to the next level, both personally and professionally. And also, the last but not least, have a bit of an elevator pitch ready. At any moment, you should be able, as you're going into this process, to say, I'm applying to business school because I want to do X. I've gained these things from what I've done so far. And now I see that business school is the conduit to get me to this next thing I want to do. And that pie in the sky thing that I know will really require this. You want to be able to say that. And if you're not there yet, take the time, look at career pathways, talk to people, talk to a career coach, find one on Leland that might, be able to be just a more broad career coach that can talk to you about different pathways. Use those opportunities to grow and engage with yourself in this process. Okay, that's a lot of me talking. I want to give you time for question and answer. And I have heard the things popping up, so I'm going to escape out of this for a minute and stop my screen sharing so that I can go back and give you my full attention. I'll go back at the very end to be able to show you like my contact details and my contact details, there's a discount code, et cetera, et cetera. For those of you that are just joining, I'm sorry that I was not able to let you in sooner. Unfortunately, it's hard to be able to get everybody in at the same time and be able to talk. So if you missed a few things, feel free to hang on at the end. I have a little bit more time at the end than just, just what we're going to talk about here. So I am going to give you the opportunity, if I can, to allow you to unmute yourselves. I respectfully ask you to please, either raise a hand, be careful of jumping on other people, sort of a thing, and give, take the time to, hear what other people are saying and take some value from that. I'm going to dive right over into the chat because there have been a few things in the chat that are coming through. So I want to be able to answer those things for you and dive into some of those things. So thanks everybody for joining. I know some of you are at work or can't turn your camera on. Like I mentioned, you're all coming from all over the place. And so, what I forgot to do was say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, as one of my very favorite colleagues says whenever she starts a meeting, because we never know where you're coming from. So hopefully you're able to drop questions in the chat. If anybody can sort of give me a thumbs up if they are struggling or able to do that, or if you have an issue related to, I'm sorry that you were in the waiting room. Natalie, I mentioned that it was tricky for me to be able to present and go back and forth. So please stay on. All I really gave was kind of an overview of, who I am, et cetera. I will absolutely go back. I will share post-session information, contact details, et cetera. And I do have time after the quarter to the hour. So please use the chat to ask any questions that, even if they are repetitive things I've said. So who wants to dive in and sort of tell me, what are you thinking about this process? What are your pressing questions? What do you wish you could always know, from somebody who's been doing this for a long time and has been both on the school side, currently still on the school side a bit, and, still able to, tell you all the things I can share related to just generally how this process works. So feel free to drop a question in the chat. I'm happy to answer typical questions people ask me. And kind of dive in that way if you're nervous to do it. So anyhow, let me know. Okay, so are AdComs aware of grade inflation in U.S. universities versus international ones? Yes, of course. So like at any school, we are very well versed in many of the different grading processes. I lived in the UK for a long time, so obviously they don't even have typical grade point averages. It's first class, second class, et cetera. We're very aware that the sort of 4.0 scale is typical to the US. Some schools in the US very much grade inflate. Some schools do not. So we do realize all sort of grade point averages and if you will, grade point reflections are not created equal. We've definitely gotten to learn much of the European system, what the academic systems are like in Asia. We are very aware of many, many schools. We do a lot of work to try to understand those schools' systems for grading and whatever the percentages of how many people fall into each area. So we really try to understand your academic background as best we can. So rest assured, fingers crossed, unless you've come from a really obscure school that we've probably seen it before. And we have lots of resources at our schools, any of the schools, especially from people who've applied in the past. What are the averages? What are people coming in with? Who have been successful, et cetera. Would it be a red flag if the only social media you have is LinkedIn, or does it matter? It does not matter. Nobody really thinks, they're always going to find everything out there. Loads of people have private profiles, things like that. I would recommend having LinkedIn because it's a great place to sort of show, your pathway, give a little bit of a highlight, give somebody the opportunity to see things that might not fit in the application. But yeah, it's not a concern if you don't have other things. Okay, that's it. Sorry. Let's see. How would you recommend making your profile more competitive if you are applying as a deferred applicant? Okay, so it's quite common to consider applying to business school right as you're coming out of undergrad. Some schools will do like a 2+2, where you're applying right as you're graduating and or at the end of your schooling, and you're going to start at a program, you're going to start in a job for 2 years and then come back to the school 2 years later. Other schools do where you start with them, you take a break, you come back. Each model is a little bit different. It's sort of like an early career pathway. You have to be super shiny to be successful in that process, because the real benefit to classmates that are there already, doing MBAs, who have worked, on average, sort of 4 to 5 years, for them and for you, is that you have a similar mindset of where we want to go, where we can intellectually stimulate one another, and where we can provide value to one another. So you have to be super shiny in that. You have to have thought about your career path. You have to, be on a pathway that's not just, I fell into this. It has to be very intentional. You have to be able to, demonstrate that the career path and plan that you're heading towards has been something you've really thought through. You understand what, the pathway might be. You understand it might open other opportunities. And in terms of academics, you really need to be top scoring, top grades. Have people gotten in with less than sort of the shiniest? Of course, but it's because they have a really robust story. Maybe they've started a business, or maybe they've been doing really interesting research, or maybe they started a nonprofit, or maybe they were a leader on their campus. So really to sort of make yourself more competitive is think about, how would I, as if you're let's say it's a 2+2, you're going to work for 2 years, you're coming into the program. How am I going to provide value to the person who's managed 5 people and is 6 years into their career, right? What am I going to bring to the table? Think about your development to this point and what you can do to sort of develop yourself further to make yourself comfortable in that sort of setting with people who might have similar years of experience to you, but most will have, closer to 5 years of experience. And this is, talking about full-time MBA programs, of course. How would admissions view a candidate who has a low GPA due to starting off as pre-med, then changing, work for 4 years in corporate, et cetera, et cetera? Not uncommon. Many people go down the science path thinking, I think I want to be a doctor, whatever, work in the health sciences. It's tough to be a doctor, and maybe you really like sciences, but you're just not cut out for all of the grueling and whatever, and it didn't work out for whatever reason. It's completely fine. Like I've said many times to people over the years, we want to know you and your story. If that's your story, make sure I understand it. It was a bumpy start. I thought I wanted to do medicine. I learned loads from that, but I learned I didn't want to do it. And I've pivoted and my grades have gotten better. I've begun this pathway in whatever area of corporate, excuse me. I've gained this leadership. I've, got a better understanding of what I want to do. And with the balance of a good GRE score, as you mentioned here, it gives us a sense of you can handle the academic rigor. One of the key questions I always get is, is there a certain GPA cutoff and or test score cutoff? There is not. schools definitely are looking at what their averages have been in the past, and especially averages by geography or, part of the world, that sort of thing, and hoping to keep those things because we want to have as competitive a student body. But our averages are based on who applies at the time. And we don't know what that is until we're sitting reading them, right? So yes, a good GRE or GMAT score is going to take you further because we're going to say, okay, they can handle it. Now what's behind the curtain? And things like having a higher score when you have a lower grade point average or lower, some blips in your academic experience, those things help to balance out, and keep us, not worried about can they handle the work. Another thing you can always consider doing is, are there classes you can take to prove to me that you can handle it, right? Again, my comment earlier about thinking ahead, don't wait till the last minute, do the things you can do to prepare, start early. Maybe you're taking a class at your local university and you're taking an accounting class because you were a biology major. And maybe you're taking a stats class, or maybe you're taking an econ class, right? That is going to help demonstrate to me that you can handle classes in that area along with a nice, strong GRE, and it helps to really balance out the academic profile. I always get asked about difference between applying round 1, round 2, or later. The most important thing you can take away from this conversation, and I know every school says this, and trust me, I've heard it from the sort of other side, is apply when you are most ready. There is no such thing as you applied in round 1, you have better chances, except in the case of maybe waiting to round 3 to the last minute. And I'll get into that in a minute, because we don't know what else the applicant pool is going to look like out there. We don't know who's going to end up applying. We're forecasting based on models of, what years past have shown us at each of our individual schools. So we're looking at you. Have you put your best foot forward in the application? So if you put an application together in round 1 because you want to get out in front of us, but everything is not as great as it can be to demonstrate who you are, you're not putting your best foot forward, right? If the score is not where you can get it, keep working. Get that score to where it needs to be, and put your best application in the second round. The majority of business school classes are made up of people who have applied in the second round. It is typically the bigger round, with the exception of probably Harvard because they only have 2 rounds. So maybe it's probably a little bit more balanced there. But everybody else who has 3 rounds, it's much more skewed to round 2 than round 1, and much less or so in round 3. And of course, the landscape of what's going on in the world, trust me, I'm not unaware of what's going on in the world related to what it looks like to be applying and what it looks like to be, getting yourself ready for business school. Considering coming to the US for business school is a challenge. And so it might take longer to get everything together. We really want to understand, that you've had the process to do that, and that you're being thoughtful about the process. Okay, we still have more time. I'm just doing a quick time check. How does AdCom view freelance work experience? It's a great question, Catherine. It really just depends. So for example, if let's say you're a younger candidate, you've maybe just graduated university and you're working in a certain, pathway, and you're doing freelance work, whether it's, helping a friend start their business, or, you're interested in, let's say, taking on a finance role, but the job you're doing doesn't include that, and you're doing freelance work in that area, those kinds of things can help to add color to the story. If the only work you have is freelance, that's okay too, as long as it's clear to us the time commitment you're having, that you can show the impact that you've had of the work that you've done. The name of the game with an MBA resume is show us the demonstrated impact of the work that you've not done, not just a laundry list of here's the skills I have. It's much more important to see, sort of where you've been able to contribute and have some solid outcomes. So freelance work in and of itself can be fine. It just a little bit depends on the circumstances around that. And again, you take control of your narrative and make sure it makes sense to me why you've done it, why it's been important to you, why it's been the path you've chosen over something else, perhaps. And if it makes sense to you and it's important to you, if I can understand that, that's what I need to know. I'm not looking for a certain pathway to, that you should be going down, or certain job that you need to have. Okay, Lucas, I'm an MBB consultant. Get your first promotion in December. I know it's generally recommended to apply in round 1, especially if I'm from an overrepresented background. I feel I would be more comfortable applying in round 2 after getting that promotion. What would be your recommendation? Okay, this is actually an add-on kind of to the other question, and a great point, okay? There is a lot of conversation out there at the MBBs, the banks, the sort of places where many people have gone to business school over years, the sort of, if you will, traditional pipeline. There are not a limited number of spaces for any particular career pathway or geography. Do we want the entire class to be consultants or bankers or marketers or supply chain? No. The benefit of your MBA experience is because of the diversity of your classmates, both career-wise, culturally, et cetera. But you want to be thoughtful about, can I put my best foot forward? So if you are a great MBB candidate and you're going to go ahead in the first round because you feel like you want to be out in front because there's other people applying that are other MBBs and you're worried they're not going to pick you as one of them, if your application doesn't feel ready and able to shine in the way it needs to, you're probably not going to be chosen anyway. Because if you feel more comfortable applying in round 2, there's a reason for that, right? The promotion is going to look shinier. Maybe you have more experience on more diverse projects. Maybe you're taking on more things in the community. Maybe you need time to get your score going. Feel solid in the timing that you apply, knowing that you're putting your best foot forward, because the round is less important than what you're presenting to me in that round. And again, it very much depends on the applicant pool. There's no way to know if every MBB out there is going to be applying this year or if it's going to be a quiet year. And especially if you're international, as I've said to many people, now is the time to apply to business school if you're international, because it just got, and I'm going to say in quotes, easier to get into business school. It's never easy to get into business school, but there are many people out there that I'm hearing, clients I've worked with, their peers, their friends that they've talked to, who are self-selecting not to apply because of their fear about coming to the US, given the political climate and what it looks like to get a visa and all those things. But if you're like, I want to go, now might be the time, because if you can have everything together and present yourself well, then you're giving yourself the best opportunity to put yourself out there. And perhaps this is a year where there are less applicants. In my experience, having done this since, dare I say, the early 2000s, very early 2000s, there is always sort of a knock-on effect the year after when the economy has bumped or there's been some issue like the pandemic, for example. It's not the immediate application year after, but it's usually the second year. So it can be very, advantageous to sort of think ahead and think, I'm ready. I don't want to wait. If I wait, I could be lumped with all the people who are already planning to apply that next time. So consider that as part of the process. Will AdComs not value classes taken at a community college the same way they value classes at a four-year university? I'm asking because I want to take some classes. Absolutely not. If you did well in those classes, research shows us that how you've done in those classes and what the class is far more important than the place you took it or the pedigree of your university. So yes, we want to see that you're challenging yourself, but many people cannot afford to go to a four-year school. Many people are taking things in addition. Maybe you've taken dual credit, all of those things. We absolutely see those things as valuable. It is not looked down upon. It's absolutely part of a whole story and important for us to understand why you did it too, right? Maybe it's because you didn't have any money, or maybe, parent lost a job or something and couldn't afford your college tuition and you had to go to community college instead. Tell us those things. Really don't leave us to our own devices to fill in the gaps, because inevitably we've got plenty of other people that have filled in the gaps for us, and we don't want to make guesses that are not there. We don't want to create a narrative that's not there. I'm still paying off my undergrad loans, so my school won't release the official transcript yet. I do have my diploma. Would that work for now? Or is there an alternative I could provide? I'd have to know a little bit more, Sarah. That's not usually the case in the US. I'm guessing it's maybe international. Schools, unless it's like you've owed them fees, for example, and you defaulted, if you're paying off your loans through a bank, schools should be giving you your transcript. Now, that said, at the time when you apply, you do not have to always provide, it depends on the school. Look at this with each school, but you do not have to always provide an official transcript. Official meaning it came from the university, it's got the seal, it's signed, all the things. You can apply with an unofficial transcript. So if you say, I'd like a copy of my unofficial transcript, so that you want to know, like, what's your overall GPA and those sorts of things, almost always you can access those things online through your university's registrar portal, or they have central systems like parchment.com, which has most schools transcripts available for you. They've made them available. You pay a small fee to get that. They really shouldn't be withholding your transcript for payment unless it's like school fees or you didn't return library books or something like that, in which case I'd say wrap that up as best you can. But if you're paying loans back, hopefully you can get access to those things. Often when we have people have issues like that, it's, again, go back to what I said, if you were able to be there in the very beginning, don't hesitate to call schools, email schools, say, I've got this issue. They're not willing to release this. I do have all of my own grade reports. I can send screenshots of all those things. Is that enough to be reviewed in the process? And they'll kind of give you what you need to know. Inevitably, everybody is reviewed provisionally, given a provisional offer of admission until we can verify you later in the process and determine whether, hopefully, what you've provided is accurate, valid, and not, in any way falsified. Coming from an overrepresented demographic, thanks for saying this, Indian consultant, what are some of the ways I can show uniqueness or just differentiate myself? Okay, this is a great question, partly because there are certain, as you're talking about, large, countries like China and India have 1 billion people, right? So loads of people are applying. Whenever you feel that you are more similar / homogeneous to the population that's applying, think about what has been different about your life, right? Have you just been on the wheel doing the things that everybody else has been doing? Or have you maybe been involved in a certain activity that's different to somebody else? Is your reason for your goals different? Is the motivation for it differently connected because of your family or, whatever career experience you've had? Your story is as valid as the person next to you. The reality in some cases is if we're comparing apples to apples and you have, let's say, the greatest scores and the greatest grades at whatever school, we're digging down to say, okay, what's the story? What do they want to do? What do they want to accomplish? What makes them different to somebody else? You do not have to have solved world peace. You do not have to have had trauma, like, someone dying in your family or, whatever, family illness or something to be admitted. It is the few and far between person that has that. Of course, some people do, but the large majority of business school classes are people that on paper, you're like, yeah, they should go to business school. So, just kind of keep that in mind when you're applying and go back to the notion of be yourself. Present yourself in the best way you know how to get somebody to be like, I want to have that person in my class. They're going to, start engaging conversation. They're going to, challenge me to think differently. They're going to bring a different perspective. And hopefully that will help you kind of get over the hump of being quote unquote too common. I'm going to try to get through as many questions as I can. You guys have great questions coming in. How involved should I be in prepping my recommenders? Do you have any tips to ensure their letters align with each other and the rest of my application? Okay, the most important sort of quick tip about recommenders is talk to them early. Make sure they understand why you want to go to business school and what your goals are. Of course, preferably it should be somebody that has worked directly with you and preferably a direct manager. Obviously, those things change sometimes because, inevitably your manager leaves or maybe it's going to be detrimental to your promotion or whatever the case is. That's fine. It happens. Just explain it. But speak to them about why you want to go and all those things, get their okay to do it, and then ask them what would be helpful to them. Would it be helpful if I remind you the projects I've worked on or the big wins I've had or things like that? Do not, under any circumstances, agree to write your own letter for them. Your managers are busy, you're busy. We will know if you have written it. There are ways to know on the school side. It's, without telling you the process, there are ways that we can figure it out. And you do not want to spend all that energy creating your best story just to have your application not completely read because we can tell that that was a falsified letter of recommendation. If you come up on that circumstance and you're like, these people want me to write it and I now have nobody to ask, contact the school. Say, what do I do in this situation? This is what they're asking. Is there some sort of workaround? There's almost always go ahead and have a peer do it, whatever, somebody who can take the time to do it that does not involve you writing it. What I often say to my clients is have the conversations with them. Sometimes it can be helpful if you're working with a consultant to have them speak to the consultant. The consultant can say, here's a few things that we've been talking about in their application. It might be helpful to highlight these things. It's also really important to keep them updated on the process. If you're going through the application process and you've developed your essays and you've been highlighting certain projects, it might be worthwhile for them to either bang the same drum and say, this particular thing's amazing, or maybe talk about something different to highlight more things. So just consider how best they can support and champion you. I'm doing a session tomorrow, another free session with a former colleague. Actually, he was a student at Booth when I was there. He's a graduate assistant working for us. And we're going to talk a little bit about sort of ways to sort of make your application sing, and how, we perceive it on the other side. Obviously, we're not going to tell you the secrets, but we're going to, give you a little bit of a peek on how a person might evaluate. Not quite of what my post MBA goals are and which firms I want to target. Can I talk about some of the projects these firms are already working on, which align with my goals, or is it unnecessary to about corporate firms? Not sure I entirely follow the question, but if I'm clear on it, you don't have to know I want to go work for, you don't have to know I want to be the chief marketing officer of Nike, right? If you do, and that's your goal, great. But if you're like, I want to work in retail and I want to work on the strategy side, that's enough for me. If you can explain what you've done before that's helped you figure that out and what you need now from an MBA that's going to help you get there. You don't have to, you can talk about firms you like. I've liked this, I've liked that. I'm still intrigued by these things. That's going to help me understand the narrative. Again, you have that control to help me understand how you've gotten to this decision of an MBA. Make it make sense for me. I'm inclined to believe you, and as are generally most readers. We've hit the 45-minute mark. I am happy to take a handful more questions that are here. If you need to cut off, feel free to. I can take five or 10 more minutes to sort of do, sort of rapid fire if I can, the questions, and hopefully I'll cover them. But I will, at the moment, I'm going to hop over and split screen myself to put on the the presentation again. Sorry, I'm losing my words. To allow you to see the slides that had the contact information. Sorry, I can't do two things at once. I'm really bad at doing two things at once, which is good because you have my undivided attention. So here we go. So this is, hopefully you can see this. This is a discount offer for anybody who's joined this session. It's a 10% off. So you can just sort of screenshot or copy that down, the Christine-B-AMA for Ask Me Anything -0619. That'll get you 10% off. It is a limited time offer because we want to make sure that you can take advantage of it. And as we're heading into round one, my docket's starting to fill up. So I want to make sure, I'm giving the attention to those folks. If you do decide to apply for a later round, you can certainly come back to me. There are other opportunities to potentially come to free sessions, et cetera. So that's that one. And then here, this one, this is my email address. That's my personal / professional email address. I've had my own coaching business for a long time. I still use my standard Yahoo email address because that's how most of my clients have gotten to know me over the years. My referrals come that way. There's my LinkedIn profile if you need it. You can also, of course, find me on Leland's platform, but all those links are there. I'm happy to put this back up again. At the very end of finishing up these last questions, so that so that if you missed that, then you have a chance to, you have a chance to copy that down. Okay, I'm going to grab just a handful of other questions here. How personal is too personal when talking about unique circumstances, using the optional essay to explain bad grades, etc. Whatever your comfort level is, go for it. I mean, you don't have to give me the gory details, which unfortunately I've had from time to time, but make it make sense, right? If you have a gap in your academics because you had undiagnosed epilepsy and you were in the hospital constantly, don't let me guess that. Don't let me sit around wondering, like, why did she keep getting C's, or why are there so many withdrawals or incompletes that she had to finish? Help me understand it, right? If you, suddenly, unfortunately, there are people that have suddenly had experiences with family losing jobs, not able to pay for school. You're paying for yourself. You've had to, take a pause to work more hours to save more money. Everybody's circumstance is different. If you are wondering if it's too personal, you can always check with the business school and say, I've had this thing. Is this too personal to go into? Do you want to know that depth? The reality is it's part of your story, and they want to know, as much as they can of your story within the confines of the words, the word length of each part of the application. But they want to hear it. They want to understand who you are and all the context. As we say, they want to understand the person behind the curtain, if you pull back the curtain, and understand the distance traveled to getting where you are now and where you want to go. Because sometimes you'll look at a resume and it looks nice and shiny, but you have no idea that person on that piece of paper where everything looks nice and polished is a first-generation college student who grew up in poverty, whose parents, whatever, only one parent was in the household, something like that. Would you say MBAs that are ex-US will become more competitive as a result of many international candidates staying away from US MBAs? It's interesting. From my experience doing this for a really long time, the value of the MBA is as sort of significant as the market, right? So if companies are valuing the knowledge you have and they're able to engage with the other people that have gone to your school, and they see that your school has provided really great training ground for you to provide and contribute value, then your MBA is a value despite whatever name it has, right? I do think that in the US at this moment, if people are nervous to come here and aren't applying to US schools and decide to go to European or Asian or wherever it is you might live, business schools, or might want to go differently to where you live, I think there are likely to be more people over time that are applying to jobs in the US down the road that have gone to schools outside the US, because first of all, not everybody can afford to get an MBA in the US. And second of all, the landscape of what's going to happen with graduate school funding and the ability for people to get visas, companies are going to have to be very aware that people were not given as easy an opportunity to come and study in the US as they might have had. What would you advise one needs to focus on their application when they applied to Harvard versus Stanford? That's kind of specific, but I guess I will say, know why you want to be applying to both. They are both top of the top, not always the top of the top in the ranking, but of course the most competitive to get into. As I say to any candidate that I've ever worked with over the years, getting into almost any business school is kind of a 50-50 proposition. And it's probably even less at Harvard and Stanford. Stanford, because it's just a numbers game, their class is much smaller. Harvard, because it's Harvard and it's got the name recognition of being Harvard and it has more global footprint, same as Stanford, of course, but people are wanting to apply there for the name. But know why you want to go there. If you're just applying because you want to have that name on your resume, it may not be the right thing for you. Also, if you go there and you're going to be very much in the middle of the sea of people heading towards that career path you want to head towards, are you as likely to be able to get that job at an MBB firm? Are you as likely to get that job, in strategy, that, corporate strategy for a tech company? Consider those things generally. Once you sit down and write those applications, for HBS, their application essays have changed this last year after probably, I think, 20 years that we've been working on the Tell Us What Else We Need to Know essay, which I've done for many, many years. And now it's more streamlined. They really want to understand that what they're looking for in terms of, this is our culture, this is who we think does well here. So really reflect on those questions. What are they asking? They have a business-minded, a growth-minded, and leadership, I think, is the other one. Really think about, why do I fit with Harvard and what can I tell them about me? Major thing to think about with Harvard is they specifically do not ask you, why do you want to go to Harvard? They have said in many presentations, they assume you've done your research and they know that you can spit back things like the case method or class names or faculty. They assume you've done the research. Tell them why they should be interested in how you're going to engage in their community. And Stanford, you better be prepared for a deep dive. Personally, what matters most and why is a very, very hard essay topic. As a fully grown adult with children of my own, that's a hard essay question or general question for me to ask, because it changes from day to day, year to year. You really need to think about what matters to you most, and it does not in any way have to relate to your career path. It can, if that's important to you, but you have the why Stanford question as the second essay question to really dig into, given that this is who I am in the world and that, whatever, my family is important to me, here's what I want to do with my life. Be aware that when you're answering the why Stanford question, the what matters question, it is what matters most and why. The what is almost never unique, right? Millions of people over the years have said family, culture, communication, connection, mental health, whatever it is. The why is what matters. So peel away the layers of the onion and really get to the core. It goes back to knowing yourself, taking the time to reflect. And in honesty, that is where the value comes from working with a consultant. I have a master's in counseling. So I have, my background has been in higher education in that space, but in counseling and in guidance counseling in high schools, that sort of thing, helping people understand what's underneath has been my wheelhouse. And that has been very valuable to people in the process to really think about, why do I even want this? What do I want to do? Why is it important to me? Last 2 minutes, and then I do have to let you all go. If I wasn't able to answer your question, you have my contact details, which I will put up again in a second. And in fact, why don't I really quickly do that while I also then in the chat give you this contact information. So let me do that really quickly. Trying to do two things at once, not having someone on the back end to help out. Hopefully that comes through okay. It's a little clunky, but there that is. To be fair, this, sorry, the discount code, if anybody needs that, I'll put that in the chat too. Oops. As well, so that you can see that. And I'm just going to look at these last few questions. Letters of rec, does the recommender send directly to the school? How does it work? Once you get online and you you open up the application, you start one, you put their name in the application form, and then they get a separate link. So that whole process is separate. Saw your profile that you've helped military applicants. How much experience do you believe is too much? The 20-year vet looked at as too experienced for a full-time program. That's a great question, Dee. I love working with military candidates. It tends to be more experience, but if you give me a good reason, it might be worthwhile. And it depends on the school. Some schools are much more open to it than others. Again, they want to see what value you're providing to your peers. They want to understand why you want to take, that time out of the stage of life you're in, but it's not a non-starter. It's just something you'd probably want to talk about with somebody like me or, whoever's doing coaching, that fits for you. But I do think, no school ever looks at a candidate and says, too much experience, too many years. But consider that the jobs that people are getting coming out of business school are of a certain level. So if you're already leadership-wise beyond that, the individual search for the next job might be much harder than the baked into the program career services, recruiting calendar and opportunity. And schools look at it from that perspective too. Are we going to be serving your needs as a school? So that you get what so that after you spent $200,000 on a US MBA, are you going to be able to, get the value you want out of that to be able to get the job you want? Or are we sort of setting you up in a situation where it could still be pretty tricky? There are amazing part-time programs out there. There are amazing sort of accelerated programs. There's the MSX program at Stanford. There are other programs of a similar nature at many of the schools. The executive MBA is a great option. It does require that you're working, but you're getting the same academic experience as full-time students, same faculty, same resources. You have to be working, so it's a little bit more of a time challenge, but I've worked on the MBA side, on and off for different schools over the years, and great opportunities there. And, out in the world, you've gotten an MBA from X. No one has any idea what delivery system it was. And that network is the whole network, right? Whatever that university is. Where the application is best to work in official courses. Oh, things like Coursera. So some schools will let you upload a transcript to their portal. As if it's like a typical university. Others, you might have to send it in separately. It's kind of specific to each school. I would just check and see sort of what they, what each school has that's different to the other in terms of their back process. There's a program called Slate, a tool called Slate that many schools use as their application system. There's another, Salesforce has another platform that universities use. So they can be customized for each school, but some of the processes will be the same because they're based off the same sort of basic structural platform. Okay. So I think I've tried to hit as many as I can. Some of you have hung on. Thank you for staying. I really hope it was helpful. I would love to have individual conversations. I do offer sort of 15-minute get to know me if you want to sort of ask me more questions or understand how I work. I have loved doing this work ever since I started it. It's all about getting to know people personally, understanding what makes them tick, and really championing your story. I'm a first-generation college student. I didn't even know what an MBA was when my husband wanted to apply for one. And here I've been advising people on getting MBAs for over 20 years. So I really love the story part of the process. So if you think it could be a fit, come back to me anytime. If you have additional questions, I have some of that contact information that might be worthwhile to reach out. And like I said, there's that 10% discount. So take advantage of that on either a package or hourly, whatever you think might be a good fit for you. And if you have any questions about how those packages are what we offer at Leland work, just please let me know. And anybody who unfortunately missed out on the first sort of 10 minutes while I was kind of going over things, 10, 15 minutes, however long that took, please hang on if there's any last question I didn't address. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining. It was great to see all of you. I'll hang for one or two more minutes in case there's one personal thing that you just sort of missed in the process. But otherwise, everybody asked great questions, and I was really glad to have you here. Thanks so much. Any last questions? The three remaining? Oh, two remaining. Can I email you for the 15-minute slide recording? I will attempt to send that to you. I'm not as tech savvy as I'd like to think I am, but I will attempt to send that to you. And if I can't, this recording, they have this recording available after the fact, and I can figure out what the link is and send you the link after the fact too. So I'll figure out the technology side and make sure you get it. But let me write your name down, Dee, and then I'll check on the backside with Leland. Any other things? I know sometimes your situations are super unique and it's a little awkward, but okay. So anyway, traveling and transitioning, so it's helpful. Great. Thank you so much for joining. I'm here anytime. I do this full time. So it's not a side hustle for me. I've done this a long time. And I really like getting to know people in the process. So hopefully it's been helpful. Please reach out if you need something, and hopefully we'll see you over on Leland's platform, and I can help you out in whatever pathway you're thinking about going forward. Nice to meet you. Take care of the remaining two.